All right, good evening. If I could ask everybody to help us get started here this evening. I'd like to welcome everyone. And as we call to order, would you please join us as we ask Abby Kuhl and Mrs. Melissa Hunter, principal at Hawthorne Hill, and Ms. Jennifer Bigger, counselor at Hawthorne Hill. Abby is going to lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance. Welcome to our guests that are here in the room and to our guests that are watching from home as well. Can I get a motion and a second for the adoption of our agenda this evening?
I move to adopt tonight's agenda as presented.
Second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Moving on to our superintendent's report. 2.01, Dr. Buck.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Board of Education. I want to point out a couple things. First off, congratulations to our Golden Tiger Marching Band, who over the weekend went to St. Charles for the Music and Motion competition, where they took first in the preliminaries and the finals. There's also a video that a local person put together of them, and I didn't know this. Their drum line is ranked 28th in the nation. First of all, I didn't know you ranked drum lines nationally, but they are the defending state champs and ranked 28th in the nation. So I got to see their show at Blue Springs maybe 3 weeks ago. Really good show. You can see on social media some of our middle school artwork, and you can go to Mid-Continental Public Library through Halloween and view it, but we have several of them on our social media, so you can see that. If you want to know more about our Diploma Plus initiative, we will have a speaker series on October 24th at 6 p.m. You can register, or you can watch it after the fact if you'd like. We put those on our YouTube channel. I assume some of you might talk about our East Trails Middle School event on October 12th, where we held the legislative day, and I just want to say thank you to our county, local, many municipalities, and our state elected officials who have attended. It was a great event, and thank you to East Trails for being such a welcoming group to allow us to bring so many people in and see the great things you do. And we have several exciting job opportunities. If you are looking for a job, we have some opportunities in our paraprofessional, custodian, and bus driver and field trips position. So if you're interested, reach out to our HR department or to your local administrator in your building, and we'd love to have you come work for us and be part of our team. Coming up, we are hosting a breakfast on November 1st for our real estate, housing, and development industry. Last I checked, at the beginning of the week, we already had 50 signed up, so it's going to be a robust meeting for breakfast. It's the first time we've ever done that, and so we're very excited about that. And if you're a realtor or a builder and you want to join, reach out to our PR team, our Katie Bergen, who's taking RSVPs for that. That's all I have.
Thank you, Dr. Buck. Moving on to item 3.01, we'll welcome back up Hawthorne Hill, our first school spotlight tonight. So again, Mrs. Melissa Hunter, our Hawthorne Hill principal, Ms. Jennifer Bigger, our Hawthorne Hill counselor, and Abby Kuhl is with us.
Okay, where would you like us to stand? Right here?
Sure.
You'll need a
yes.
Thank you for having us. You'll need a microphone. Okay, up here with me, I have little Miss Abby, and she is going to share after we show a video today. I also really wanted Miss Jen Bigger to come. She is our counselor at Hawthorne Hill, and she owns Dakota, our therapy dog. Obviously, she's Dakota's driver. We needed her to be here. But I also just wanted to say Thank you to Jen Bigger. She was part of a team last year that worked together, met several times, so that we could safely allow therapy dogs back into our buildings. And I want to thank the board as well, because it has been a really cool opportunity. So we were able to start right out of the gate with Dakota being in our building this year. We do have a video. We had high school students from Summit Tech Academy actually approach us to see if they could do a video about Dakota, our therapy dog, and they did a really nice job. So it's kind of fun to give props to another school as well while we are up here. Dr. Whaley?
Be quiet, she's trying to sleep.
Hawthorne Hill just added a new member to their staff, but it might not be who you expect. Meet Dakota, the new therapy dog for Hawthorne Hill Elementary School. Dakota's daily routine involves teaching students dog safety, helping students who need her support, and of course, taking naps. Dakota's journey didn't start in a school, however.
I got Dakota in 2014. I got her through a company called CARES, and it's in Concordia, Kansas, and they do what is called a temperament test. And that temperament test kind of decides if they can work with humans well, if they can follow directions. They don't want them too alpha, and they don't want them too passive, where they don't want to go up to people. What happens after that is they go to a prison in Kansas, and they get to train the basic skills. So like sitting, standing, they potty train them, they do those basic skills. Once they get out of there, they go to a foster parent, is what they call them. So she was trained as a fully ADA trained service dog. And since I don't have a disability where she uses those skills, she's just a very, very, very well-trained therapy dog.
Dakota has really come a long way, but now she is happily supporting her closest friends at Hawthorne Hill Elementary.
And just interacting with the staff and the families and the students has just been phenomenal. It's been a blessing to one Dakota. She's working, she's fulfilling her life. Like last year, she would wait by the door and just kind of expect to go with me, and she wouldn't. I couldn't bring her, but this year she's just happy walking out the door, and it's perfect.
We haven't had Dakota very long here at school, but while we've been here, the kids are already in love with her. When they see her, they give her a caring heart when they see her. They tell other kids the rules about her. So we had a new student start yesterday, and they said, "Have you met Dakota?" They already know like the rules for Dakota, and they keep asking when Dakota gets to come to our classroom. So today when I told them that she was coming, it was very exciting.
Dakota brings another element to our school, another avenue for kids to kind of escape when, they're having anxiety. I've got some students who, I'm like, would you like to go talk to Dakota? It's not even, do you want to go talk to Mrs. Bigger? I don't even recognize sometimes when I'm having anxiety because we're teachers and we're so focused on our students' needs. But when she comes in the room, that's when I'm like, I kind of de-escalate, and I realize just how anxious I sometimes can be and how she kind of just soothes that.
Yeah, I would say the energy that she just brings into the school is so great. I think every student notices her and every student loves having her around. She's got a mailbox right outside of Bigger's classroom, and I'll have students ask almost every day, like, hey, can I go drop off? I drew a picture for Dakota. Can I go drop it off in her mailbox? Or I wrote a letter to Dakota. And it's just kind of like just an extra thing at school that I think is really bringing a positive aspect to it. Look at that.
Yeah, she's our community.
I mean, yeah, our community. That's a good way to put it.
I have a new student in first grade, and the hardest part of being a new student is just making those friendships. So the second or third day of school, we got to go to the counselor's office and meet Dakota and pet Dakota. And later in the day, I asked this new friend what his favorite part of the day was, and he said that he had made a new friend. And so I got really excited and asked him about this new friendship. And he said when he got to pet Dakota and she wagged her tail and just showed that affection towards him, that he thought he had found a new friend at Hawthorne Hill.
Hawthorne Hill students love getting to see and interact with Dakota.
I like Dakota about being here because she's so cute. She's kind.
She's kind.
Because she's the only dog in Lee Summit. I like how she's soft and her ears are like fluffy. Because her loves us and care about us. I like feeling her fluffy hair. Well, I like how I cuddle her and she's like so fluffy.
A therapy dog is a change no one at Hawthorne Hill knew they needed. But everyone loved Dakota the minute she stepped into their lives. Everyone is so thankful to have her and can't wait for her next visit.
The students at STA did a really nice job, didn't they? We love that video. So Dakota, almost every morning, will bring me one of her stuffed animals. She'll waddle into my office, and she's carrying it in her mouth, and she leaves it at my feet. And we don't know if she wants me to babysit or if she thinks I need the extra support. We don't know, but it's kind of becoming a thing. So I'm going to ask Miss Abby what she likes about having Dakota at school.
So the thing I like about Dakota is she's fluffy and she's cute and also that she's at the school and she makes everybody happy.
There you go. Great job. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, that's very good, Abby.
Thank you, Abby and Mrs. Hunter and Ms. Baker. Thank you. And Dakota. Thank you. All right, moving on. We will go to item 3.02, and we have Andy Campbell joining us to talk about Summit Ridge Academy.
Push that. Can you guys hear me? All right, well, I'm going to talk about a couple of things that we have going on at STA. STA, I just watched their video. They're awesome too. SRA, Summit Ridge Academy. So going back to some of the D-team work that we've done, and that's really driving a lot of the initiatives that we have going on at Summit Ridge right now. That work has been incredibly important to us and really recognizing some things where we needed to improve and get better. And so I put up here just so that you could see the kind of the problem statement that we started with, or the what we wanted to tackle with the work that we're doing. And really this came from our belonging interviews last year, and really just sitting down and talking to kids about what we needed to do and do better at the Ridge. And so how could we create a more inclusive culture that really focuses on welcoming our kids? As you know, our kids roll in and out of the program pretty frequently. We started the year with 130. We had 74 new students to start the year this year, which is an awesome problem to have. That meant we had a lot of graduates last year, which is also exciting. And then we just started second quarter, we've brought in 12 so far. We've got 3 more to go. So again, every quarter we seem like we get new kids. And so really creating that welcoming culture and atmosphere in our building has become a huge priority for us. And so we started with the first thing that we really wanted to focus on was how do we bring those new kids on board? And so putting a plan in place, it was really about spending the first 2 days of the school year and then subsequently each quarter as we bring new kids on, just getting everybody on board and helping people get to know each other and helping kids feel really successful. And so asking one of my kids to come to a board meeting, little challenging, so I got the next best thing. And I asked several students just send me a little blurb about how the first couple of days helped you with your transition. And I'll let you read the first statement. I got 4. I chose 4 of the statements. I probably had about 20 kids that voluntarily sent me a statement about, and they all kind of said the same thing, but you can see very open. Teachers showed they actually cared. They felt wanted and cared about. This one, here's 3 more from 3 of our students. And so I think, based on those comments from kids, we're off to a good start. We were excited so again, I told you second quarter we brought on new kids. So the next phase of our onboarding piece is we identified student ambassadors. And what was really cool was several of the new kids that started with us in the fall wanted to be ambassadors for new kids. And so on the first day with new students, we connected those kids with a student, and they kind of showed them around the building. They ate lunch with them. They answered questions for them, and just really kind of helped them feel comfortable. And then on day 2, we had a meeting, and I went over just some orientation stuff and just kind of talked about the building since they had a day. But we feel really good about where we're going with that. I've already got kids coming up and asking, hey, can I be an ambassador when we bring kids in that semester? And so it's kind of one of those programs that's kind of created the beginning of it, and the kids are going to sustain it, I think, that are also excited about it. The other one of our initiatives that came out of our D team work was just a building change, turning what used to be our old gym, multi-purpose room, into a student union. It's pretty exciting already. This summer we were able to get some painting done in there. Kyle and his group were awesome to work with. We got carpet in there, which totally changes the look of the room. And then we've already moved, as you can see, some furniture in there. We're still in the process of getting things, you know how that goes with ordering furniture and things. And then found out the other day we're working with Freedom Interiors, and they're going to be donating some pieces to us, and then we're buying some things too. So and that's what you see. Some of the stuff, I went out to Freedom the other day, and these are some of the things that they'll be giving us: the D table for kids to be able to work on, group presentations, that central seating piece. And the goal with this space is to just create a space in the building where kids can go and kind of just hang out when they've gotten work done or whatever, and really work on those interpersonal relationships. As you know, when you try to bring students from 3 schools together, that can be a challenge at times, and so we're really focused on that and doing that work. So those are the things we got. Kids are already using it. Threw a couple pictures up there of the room in action, and so continuing to work on that, and hopefully we're going to be doing later in the year, once we get it all done, we will do kind of a grand unveiling of the room and everything else, and we'll definitely send out some invites for you guys to come and check it out. But we're pretty proud of what's going on there, and feel good about the work we're doing for kids. So thank you. Not puppies and cute kids, but good stuff anyway, right? Hopefully. Thank you.
Good stuff. Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Appreciate your presentation. All right. We want to
Clap for him,
Yeah.
too.
let's do it. Do awesome work. We're proud. We're proud of you. All right. Moving on now to item 3.03. We have Lee Moore from J.E. Dunn. That'll give us our Lee Summit High School update.
Good evening, Madam President, Board, Dr. Buck. Great to see you all tonight. As mentioned, my name is Lee Moore. I'm a Vice President with J. Dunn Construction Company, and I'm the project executive on your Lee Summit High School project. So super excited to be here. Also, a little fun fact, I live in the district and have 3 kids in the district. So super excited to be a part of this project. We were also involved in Mason Elementary, which completed last year. But so I'm going to talk about Lee Summit High School. Mike Childs, I'm filling in for him tonight. He couldn't be here. So we'll start with high-level view of the high school here. So we have basically the current progress, our future work coming, and what's complete. So the areas in blue are the current areas we're working on. We'll dive into some pictures and some details of that. The yellow is what we have upcoming in future phases. And then the dark areas are the areas that we've completed to date. There's also a schedule there for start and finish dates, and we've been coloring items as we've been finishing there. So we'll dive into really fun, exciting stuff here. So this is the blue areas. This is what we finished that turned over this last summer. So you got some pictures of some hallways. We got that B wing completed with or the A wing there with the art room and sped, and a little bit of work in the gym, the field house gym as well. So one picture there on your right-hand side there is the picture of the hallway there and the new addition as well. And then we were able to finish the windows over in J. That's the squiggly lines there around the J area. So pretty exciting. So what do we have going on right now? So this is a little bit of renovation work we're doing in Area B, Level 1 and 2. You can see some of the metal studs and CMU and roughing going in. So we're looking to get started with finishes here, and this space will turn over December break. So the space will look pretty similar to the hallway pictures in the other Area B that we looked at the previous slide. So next up is the old administration area. So we call that area G. So again, we're doing, you can see the metal studs and some mechanical rough ends, so similar progress as the other area. And in this area, this will turn over a couple new classrooms and a new cafe store there. Site work. So as you can imagine, a lot of site work going on, and we've been kind of chipping away at this part. So we've got a little bit of progress here to talk about. A lot of the site work's been going on during the summer, as you can imagine. We want to make sure and maintain access throughout that site during school. So starting from left to right, we've got the northwest corner of the site. That little yellow area is the detention basin we did, but we were actually just starting to take over and complete that new parking lot there that you see right south of that yellow box. In the middle there, we've got the chiller area, the new chiller area, so that area is in progress. We've got brick walls going up. We're looking for a December completion there, and then the picture on the right is the new loading dock. So we were able to finish that this summer, so that is being used by the school. So the addition, so this one you might have seen as you were driving by. We've got some significant mass going there with the finishing up the structural steel. So this is the second phase of the addition that's going to link the north and south buildings there. So we're in the progress of just wrapping up steel. As you can see with the lift there, we're starting to do some metal stud framing, working to get that addition enclosed by winter so we can work on finishes. And that addition will turn over spring break. This addition will house the new media center, a learning stair, a broadcasting space, and then obviously the continued extension of that new corridor that connects the spine of the building there. So the other phase, second phase of this addition is on the south side of the addition we just turned over there, right outside the old administration area. So again, similar schedule. We have steel coming up shortly. We are just wrapping up concrete there. Looking to, again, work on dry end by winter so we can get this area turned over by spring break of 2023 as well. So that concludes the updates. Just finish up with a couple views of renderings of what the spaces are going to look like when they're complete. So this is on the east side of the building. They're kind of looking into that new addition that we're working on. That's the football field side of the building. And then this is just south of the new administration area, that small addition there on the south side that we're working on right outside the old administration area. And then we've got a website there. So we do have a custom website for the project that we do put all these project updates on, if anyone would like to visit that. So that's all I've got for tonight. Anybody have any questions?
All right. Thank you. Board Member Fritchie?
Yes. Welcome, and thanks for coming to talk to us tonight. My only question was, you showed a facade of the front of the building that faces 50, or what's the current front of the building that faces 50 Highway. I thought you showed a facade at some point there. Was that the first slide? Okay.
Which slide? This one?
No, that one.
Okay.
Okay. So when does the demolition of the front part of the building start in order to create that facade?
So let me look at my schedule here. I'm thinking it's just January is when we start that demolition there. Yeah, what area is that? Yeah, I think it's January. It's either January or March. I apologize. I'm not familiar with the areas there, but it'll happen. It'll be the start of the year. So that's area L.
Right. So I know it's one of the last areas that you guys are going to renovate, according to your plans. I was looking at that. I just didn't know when you did the demo, because it's going to look a lot different to people when they're driving down 50 Highway and looking over at Lee Summit High and not seeing that front. And my old room 115 is going to go bye-bye then.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that whole one-story wood structure there on that south side will be demoed off, and then that what you're seeing there is a new scrim wall that we build and create that new facade. So that will start the first of the year.
And does that just create? Are you just going to take those rooms off? Or are you creating a new hallway there, or what's What, do you know what's going in
cre-
that spot?
We removed the old classrooms there, so that's like the oldest part of the building.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll just close off what openings there are there. And so there is no new space, no addition there. We just take off the old, and then we do renovate, the other side of that that's left.
Okay, thank you very much.
We have some site work too that goes along there on the south side too.
Great questions. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thank you all.
All right. Moving on to our next item, 3.04, and we have Dr. Barger that will share with us the board priorities matrix update.
Good evening. As you probably recall from work session earlier this year, we had good conversation that actually started in board work session this summer and moved into an August work session in which we talked about how in previous years we had talked about Board of Education updates coming with 3 individual people, looking at 3 individual board priorities. We also had the need to do updates on CSIP, MSIP, equity plan, lots of things together. So what we decided at that time was that what was a better plan to provide the board updates and the community updates was to provide right-timed metrics in which we were providing data to the board in alignment with all of those things and MSIP 6 at the time that the data is the most relevant. So this is just a snapshot of that matrix that we discussed in work session, so you can have a quick reminder of what that October through July distribution of the metrics are. One of the conversations that we've had in the time since we were together with the creation of this document is that the original metrics sheet that I put together didn't specifically outline the connection to the existing board-approved equity plan. So what we have done is added to the 4 months a very specific reference in terms of equity plan metrics to be reported out to the board in November, January, March, and June as an addition to the existing plan for metric updates. What those potential equity metrics could include would be a number of D-team facilitators trained, the number of staff trained by D-team facilitators. We would be able to provide quarterly building-specific metrics provided by each building level D-team, the number of community members and hours in a D-team, students and hours with D-team work, changes in any system work we've done, i.e. a curriculum review process, and goal guide goal updates with regards to our equity plan. It should also be noted that a number of the metrics that were already on that sheet were also designed to discuss equity, as we know it is embedded in all of the work that we do. So as we look specifically to the work and the metrics of October of 2022, we were charged with reporting out today on the ACT, NWEA, and Panorama student and staff survey data, as that is all relevant and timely data for this time of year. One of the things I would encourage the board to think through briefly is the ladder of inference. In the amount of time that we would have for a board update, obviously we are looking at a slice of data. Any one of these data sets has much more data behind it and could have multiple hour sessions focusing on it. So one of the things that we want to do is make sure that we stay in the point of ladder of inference in which we are reviewing our selected data and not too quickly jumping to conclusions or beliefs, but instead getting to the point where we can ask what questions do we have to gather more data so that we can eventually get to that place of conclusion or belief. So as we move out of that, we'd like to take a look at our ACT scores. It is important to know that ACT can be reported in 2 ways for R7 and 3 ways in other districts. The official ACT report is a reflection of the cohort that graduated last spring and their most recent ACT. The state, and the we only see our score. We don't see others' version of that. The state of Missouri does produce eventually a list in which comparative data is available for other districts. However, the state of Missouri in DESE utilizes this as part of our MSIP process, and so they will look at the graduating seniors and the student's highest score, not necessarily their last score. So when we get to the point of comparison of districts later in the game, there may be some discrepancy between what you see as the official score released by ACT and what the state has as comparison, and that's the reason for those differences. In a school district that provides census testing, where everyone takes the test on a given day like we used to prior to COVID, there's a third way that it is reported, and it is about the test takers that took the test on that given day. So we really have two possible options. So as you can see, our district ACT score for the class of 21-22 was a 22.3 in comparison to the state average of a 20.2 and a national of 19.8. It is worth noting that there has been quite a bit of press in the last week that collectively across the nation, ACT scores are down, and at that, you'll see that we are up. In addition to that, you can see very strong scores at all three of our scores. Probably especially proud to see a 23 at one of our high schools, which we have not seen in a while. So much to be proud there. When we consider ACT, it is also important to think about how they report to us in terms of disaggregation. There are very few ways that they report disaggregation. For example, free and reduced lunch is not something that is reported to us, but race and ethnicity is. So you can see from 2018 to 2022 on this chart, the number of students of each demographic who took the test, the percent of our test takers during each year who were in each demographic, and what the average was for those students. So for example, if you move to the far right of this column, you can see that our average again was that 22.3. For our black students, it is 18.7. For our white students, it is a 23. I'm gonna lose track of the rows here, but you can follow the rows there all the way down through those ethnicities. It is important also to note that rigorous coursework matters. We also know that gaps remain. What you are looking at here is the difference between students who report, and it is self-reported, that they have completed what is called the ACT core. So essentially they've taken their 4 years of math to a certain degree, 4 years of English, above and beyond what might be graduation requirements from high school, but to ensure that they have completed the ACT core courses. And you can see that those students who are in blue who have taken the ACT score, for the most part, with the exception of our multiracial students, outperform those in the same race and ethnicity than those who do not take. So coursework matters. Access to curriculum most certainly benefits performance on the ACT. That being said, you can also see that we still have significant gaps. For example, our gap between black students who have taken the core and white students who have not still remains. As we move out of ACT, we can look to a test an assessment that moves from, this data would have been grade 2 through grade 8, and then we would have some additional high school courses, reading and algebra, that are reflected in our NWEA data. And we heard a little bit about the NWEA during work session as a precursor to our MTSS work. NWEA in math, we can take a look at a lot of things. The first thing to note about NWEA is it is a very individualized student test. It not only gives a student status score, it also measures growth of a student, expected growth of a student, and whether or not they hit that target. It is also nationally normed. I'm gonna say sort of. It is nationally normed. However, it is normed currently against a norming study from 2020. So it is important when you see to the right, and we talk here in a minute about national percentile, that we are not comparing the national percentile of the students who actually took it this season with our students. What we are looking is at our students in comparison to a norming study from 2020. So it is very likely that although it says 67th percentile, that we actually are higher than that if we consider how we performed in relationship to the actual test takers who were in seats right now taking the test. What we are looking at this particular chart in math is cohort data. So where it says grade 3, we are comparing grade 3 students' percentile rank as third graders in comparison to that same group of students' percentile rank as second graders. If you think of it as a parent, when I take my child to the physician or the pediatrician as a 6-year-old, if he is in the 60th percentile as a 6-year-old, and then the next year I take him and he is in the 70th percentile as a 7-year-old, he is outpacing the nation in terms of his growth. The same is true as we look at percentile ranks academically. So you can see that in the area of math, every single one of our grades, with the exception of 6th grade, which was a break even, increased their national percentile rank from last year to this year. So that would be the equivalent of going to the physician's office and being in that 70th percentile the year after the year where you had been in the 60th, as an example. Okay. As we take that same look at the data, we can take a look at how that disseminates across our demographics. And there is quite a bit of data here, so for the purpose of summary, it is important to note that there was an increase in percentile rank in every cohort 3 through 8, except for 6th grade, which was exactly the same, and that while gaps certainly remain between the subgroups, every racial subgroup at every grade level increased their percentile rank from fall of 21 to fall of 22. When we consider the same data from the reading perspective, we can see that we saw an 11-point national percentile increase. I wanted to be careful that I'm not twisting my percentiles and percentages in there. In 3rd grade, 1 in 4th grade. It was an even in 5th grade. We did go down a couple of percentiles in 6th grade, up at 7th grade, and at a 0 at 8th grade. When we look at this data from ELA as it relates to subgroup, again, quite a bit of data on the page, but for the purpose of summary, it is worth noting that as we look at subgroup racial growth in reading, there are 30 possible combinations of racial subgroup and grade. In reading, 18 of the grade level subgroups showed percentile increase from fall 21 to 22. 3 remained the same. The 9 grade level race subgroups that decreased their percentile rank in reading from fall 21 to fall 22 are as follows. 3rd grade Asian, consisting of 8 students. 4th grade Hispanic Latino, 99 students. 5th grade Black, 146 students. 5th grade Multiracial, 85 students. 6th grade Asian, 23 students. 6th grade Hispanic Latino, 96 students. 6th grade White, 730 students. 8th grade Hispanic Latino, 95 students. And 8th grade White, 810 students. So those are the groups in which that percentile decreased from one year to the next. It is important to note that while we can certainly look in aggregate with NWEA, we would also have data in the spring that would be something that we would report when we look on that right time to metrics that would allow us to indicate how students' growth happened from fall to spring, because ultimately, while we want to look at aggregate, what we want to make sure is that each individual child is meeting their designated growth goal as is outlined from fall to spring, so we'll be able to bring you that data in the spring as it relates to this assessment. The last piece of data that we have scheduled for fall, because it is anchored to a fall, winter, spring window, is the data that comes from our Panorama student and staff surveys. As a reminder, we have 2 grade ranges that are surveyed with Panorama, grade 3-5 and grades 6 through 12. Within those 2 grade spans, there are 3 surveys. There is a climate survey, an equity survey, and a social and emotional learning survey. The equity survey is not taken in grades 3 through 5. Let's look specifically at the results of our fall 2022 3 through 5 Panorama survey. When we look at student social and climate survey, again, this group does not take the diversity portion. School belonging is at 76% favorable, and school safety is at 75% favorable for grades 3 through 5. Favorable means students answered in the way that indicates that that is favorable in their space. We think it is important to note that while 76 and 75 may cause us to pause and question, if you look to the right, that puts us at approximately the 90th percentile nationwide with regard to these answers. You will note that as I share percentiles, they're all round numbers because they report to us from Panorama in the nearest decile. Continuing our look at grades 3 through 5, when we look at social and emotional learning, that falls into the categories of self-management, social awareness, growth mindset, and self-efficacy. And again, you can see 83% favorable, 79% favorable, 65% favorable, and 64% favorable. And then there is not enough national data for the self-management component, but they're at the 90th, 90th, and 80th percentile nationally. When we move up a grade span to grades 6 through 12, we're looking at similar data. We look at our student social, climate, and equity survey. Again, different questions included with our older students than our littles take. That includes school safety at a favorable response of 63%, diversity and inclusion at 81%, cultural awareness and action at 59%, and the place where we have some work to do is that sense of belonging at 43%, which puts us at the 20th percentile nationally. When we look at our student social and emotional learning survey in grades 6 through 12, self-management at 80%, social awareness at 70% favorable, growth mindset at 59%, and self-efficacy at 66%. Again, 90th, 70th, 80th, and again, a place to do some work there at the 50th national percentile as it relates to self-efficacy. We also give a staff survey. The survey is divided into 2 categories, classroom teachers and all other staff. When we look at our teacher survey, and we've only given that particular survey for 2 years. We look at student mindset. We were at 75% favorable. Efficacy as a teacher, 72%. Being equipped to educate all students, 72%. Sense of belonging, 66% favorable. School climate, 65% favorable. And professional learning about social and emotional learning, 47% favorable. And you can see to the right that ranges from the 20th to the 60th percentile nationally. When we look at our non-teaching staff survey, you can see that we are at the 66% for school climate and 63% in belonging, and the respective percentiles are to the right. It is worth noting that the delineation between non-teaching staff and teaching staff has guided some of our D-team work, as has the results of our student surveys as we move forward in some of that work. So that's, again, it's a super quick considering the amount of data that exists with each of these tools, look at data. So as we return to that ladder of inference, I think what I would like to ask, instead of do you have any questions, is what additional information, although I'll take questions as well, but what additional information might you need from us as leaders to be able to provide you additional information before we reach that conclusion portion on this ladder. So open to any questions or needs for additional information.
Thank you, Dr. Barger. Do we have questions? Board Member Eslick?
Let me get the slide number for you. On the ACT slide, it would be slide 10. Just on average, it looks like from the 2018, 2019, just total number of students taking the ACT, that there's been about a 30 to 35% decline in the total number of students taking the ACT. While I think it's great that our averages are great on the test scores, the fact that we have so many fewer students, is that the same that people are seeing nationally? What's causing that, do you think?
That's actually a result of our decision to move away from census testing to offering vouchers. So census testing was a day in I don't remember which month, in which we would, probably April, in which we would say, okay, every single junior who is enrolled we're shutting school class down and we're all taking the ACT. So essentially you have 100% participation or close to. COVID, that didn't seem to be the best fit for testing anymore. We did still feel a commitment from an equity standpoint to ensure that we were providing an ACT to any student who wanted it. So we shifted to a voucher model in which every student has the right to one voucher to take a free Saturday ACT if paid for by the district. They just ask for the voucher and then they register for themselves and attend on Saturday. And one interesting piece of information that Dr. Wright discovered is that when we began to look at the distribution of students by race, obviously not the same quantity because it's not the same quantity in totality, but we saw a very similar proportion in terms of racial participation in ACT as distributed around the total group from census testing and Saturday testing.
I do see that too. But I also have to point out, someone got a 30. Perfect's 32, isn't it?
36.
Oh, okay. That's still awesome. That's
30.
That's still amazing. That my deflated response was not indicative that it's not still amazing. But
30 is still awesome,
That's
yes.
a pretty incredible. I'm just saying. That's great.
Board Member Foley?
In slide 26, sense of belonging had a national percentile of 20%. That stood out. And then in slide 29, educating all students had a national percentile of 20%. So I was just curious, since those numbers stand out, what are the processes for investigating and digging into why people responded that way?
Right. So I think really that really cuts right to the core of that D-team work, right? So if you'll recall, and Ms. Sanders has talked a little bit through that process, that while the empathy interviews that are part of the D-team work isn't necessarily directly related to the Panorama, many of our building teams use Panorama data to guide their D-team goals, or at least to be starting point just like you did, like, hey, let's wonder a little bit about why this is and start asking more questions. And so a lot of the empathy interview process involved figuring out what question you're wanting to ask and dig deeper. So to some degree, that was part of our D team work, depended on which buildings we're asking. I do think when we start to look at sense of belonging, and again, when we start to look at what those actual questions are, it is lots about feeling equipped to meet each child's need in that educator, in this teaching all students, educating all students category. So I am hypothesizing a little bit, but I think we certainly know that student needs, both social and emotionally and academically, look and feel a little different in the last couple of years than maybe some of our veteran teachers have experienced. So I probably would attribute some of that to that, although that's not different than any other place in the nation, right? So we have to be aware that we're thinking in comparison of a national percentile pretty low. So I think probably the best answer to that is through some of those empathy interviews. And honestly, even outside of the D team work, we have Focused Fridays in which the ask is that the staff is reviewing their NWEA data and reflecting it. And while I can't speak to what each building is asking, certainly if that number is, if I'm a building principal and that number is the same in my building, I'm having some pretty crucial conversations with staff about how do we make this better and what might have led to that being the response rate.
Thank you. Can I ask one more question? Okay. When will this next be given so that we can kind of evaluate if that changes, particularly the question for the teachers?
Do we give the teacher in the winter also 3 times? Okay, I couldn't remember if it was twice or 3 times a year. We have 3 windows, and just double check that we were doing the same for staff. We have 3 windows, fall, winter, and spring, and we are scheduled to come back on the metric update for an NWEA and Panorama update, similar to this, plus some others in January, because that will be right after that winter window closes, so we can do a quick follow-up there. Now, I will say this. You will note that I did fall-to-fall comparisons. And I do think sense of belonging probably is pretty consistent. But we've been trying to look from season to season, because we know that where people are at the start of school brings with it a level of excitement and emotion that's difficult to measure in comparison to, like, it's getting dark at 4 o'clock and everyone's kind of feeling, holiday seasons are over and we're into February. So we're trying to do some season to season comparison, but we will absolutely have an update in January.
Thank you.
Member Eslick?
Sorry, you have to circle back to me again. So I have another question, and this is on slide 15, and this is the NWEA data for math. And I don't really have a question, but really it's just kind of a piggyback off of some of the topics that we discussed during our work session, which had to do with math interventionists, because I look at some of these numbers, understanding that this is a snapshot and this is one moment in time, and we can continue to look at it. But I have concerns about looking at all of the student groups that are under this 40th percentile, and we just had this conversation about our ability to meet the need on an interventionist level for math, and looking at the number of students that would be impacted by that number, it just seems like an overwhelming amount that wouldn't be met by one teacher being able to do that level of intervention in a classroom. So I'm just making that statement as maybe an opportunity for us to, as a board, to look more into that as we get more NWEA data in the future. But just an observation and a concern of mine on where our students sit and whether we have the ability to help them adequately.
And I very much always appreciate advocacy for support for our teachers. I do think one thing to also keep in mind is that MTSS process is about each individual child who's at that and that doesn't always play out in terms of the aggregate being the same. But that aside, absolutely a supporter of any help we can get our teachers in terms of serving students.
Other questions? I do have one. Oh, Board Member Sparks.
No questions, other than I do appreciate the additional information that has been packed into this presentation, and I also appreciate the more frequent presentation that will be coming before the board, being updated with the metrics. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
And I think my question is, we've been talking as a board that being data-driven. I think I feel like I need some time to dive a little bit deeper into this data and think about that. So as board members have questions, are we fine to send those, Dr. Buck, to you and Dr. Barger in follow-up to this presentation? And then I think just the next part is, as a board, I'm trusting that when I'm seeing numbers that are concerning, that there are certainly action plans that are going on in the schools and in the buildings, and that we trust our teachers and our administrators that there is deep work going on around these items at the student level, so that as we continue to track these numbers, when we hear again in January, we should see some improvements. Is that a valid assumption?
Absolutely valid assumption, and really sort of speaks to the work session topic, right, of MTSS, particularly at the elementary level. As we move each individual child through their necessary growth, we should see the collective rise as well. I hope we do see that exact data present in the winter and again in the spring, and would anticipate that the work would reflect that. But we also know that sometimes that MTSS work is slow and incremental as well.
Sure. Thank you. Appreciate that, because I think that's what's hard for me sometimes, is to think about, if you pull this lever, the results may not be January, the results may be May, but if we know that people are pulling those levers and we're trusting that the process is working, then we will see those improvements over time.
And the place that you will see it, and it's hard because it's hard to do it in aggregate, the place that we see it, if you think back to the work session and you hear about that progress monitoring and FastBridge, that's where we see it. Each individual student growth is visible on a much more short-term basis in a way that may or may not present in aggregate quite as quickly.
Great. Appreciate that. Thank you. Vice President Fritchie.
Well, I think what you just said prompted a question in my mind, and that is that you keep referring back to what the interventions at the elementary level, but how do we do those interventions at the middle and the high school levels when you've got kids taking different coursework? Now, granted, all the sixth graders have reading and a language arts class, and all the seventh graders and eighth graders have the same class, basically, maybe an accelerated version in some cases. But how do you do that? How do you do interventions for kids whose scores aren't going that well on the secondary level?
So if we're being totally honest, that very sequential MTSS stair-step process probably isn't as systematized at the secondary level for that very reason. However, it doesn't mean supports aren't there. So when we think about a struggling reader who might have already been identified in MTSS at the elementary level and then worked their way into a middle school or a high school, or a student who might have been either reading or somehow managed to be a non-reader that was not identified until later in the game, we typically manage those at the middle and high schools through specific sections. So for example, we have reading lab, we have reading strategies where they would be doubled up. So if you think back to the core message of MTSS, we always never want to out-intervene the core. They take their regular English and then they have a reading lab for the support or reading strategies, or we have a math lab. So typically that's handled through a course-by-course progression, and then obviously when we get into courses like history and biology, those are really become more about teacher and students developing plans at the teacher level.
Board Member Sparks?
I know this is going to be a very difficult question, so I'm saying it up front. How do students fall through the gap?
I think one of the things that we know about students is that they develop coping strategies in many ways, right? And so we work very hard to be diligent in our instruction. And again, the development and the shoring up of that MTSS makes it harder and harder and harder to fall through the gap, right? But if things got loose, or if somebody might be, for example, a word color, right? They might be able to say out loud the words, and you hear them say out loud the words, and it sounds like they're reading, and their comprehension might not be there at all. And so if for some reason we weren't purposefully asking the comprehension question, Is it also students who sometimes find a reason to be at the nurse or the drinking fountain or other strategies to avoid being identified? But again, our goal is to have shored that up over the years so fewer and fewer find themselves in that place.
I bring that up as a question, wasn't necessarily supposed to be a trick question, but I know that that's a serious question, and that's because we have a lot of students that for whatever reason, they tend to fall through the cracks. And they're, I just want to be confident in knowing that we are absolutely doing everything as a district to limit, and if at all possible, to zero, to where our students are able to fall through the cracks when it comes to their academic success.
We're trying to narrow the crack.
That's right. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Barger.
Thank you.
Great data and update and conversation. And so as you have questions, let's get those asked and answered as well. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on now to item 4.01, we'll have our public comments. Board Member Murdoch, can you please help us with our statement regarding public comment?
Thank you, President Campbell. Tonight, we do appreciate your attendance and willingness to speak to the board. For those of you speaking, please remember that while this is a public meeting, this part of the meeting does not contemplate a conversation between speakers and board members. The board does not respond to public comments during the meeting, but may ask clarifying questions. Your comments will be noted by the board, and if appropriate, we will direct the subject to administrators who are responsible for that particular subject matter. Pursuant to Board Policy BDDH, we will be limiting all comments to no more than 10 people with a limit of 3 minutes each. Your allotted 3 minutes will be counted down on the screen. Please conclude your comments when the timer expires. Only those who have signed up prior to the meeting will be allowed to address the board tonight, and we do remind all speakers to refrain from using the names of any students or staff in your remarks. Remain respectful and ensure your comments pertain to district operations. We also ask all audience members to remain respectful. Lastly, when your name is called, please go to the podium. Clearly state your name and the organization you represent, if any.
Thank you, Board Member Murdoch. Our first speaker is Corey McDonald, and our next speaker will be Ron Freeman.
Good evening. My name is Corey McDonald. I represent Community Solutions Focus Group, and I am a very concerned parent. I think the answer to your question has to start at home. Thank you to the 2 board members that actually emailed me back when I emailed you, and thank you for the 2 board members I was able to meet with. It's a shame that the other board members kind of ignored my email. I encourage you to better communicate with parents, especially when you receive an email from a parent with the concerns about an epidemic harming our children. It should be as important to you as it is to us. Unfortunately, my 15-year-old son had been vaping, and when confronted, he stated that he'd been getting vape hits from students in the restrooms at least 3 times a day. He attends Lee Summit West High School. And when I found out, we immediately had an intervention with our son, his friends, and their parents to educate them about the dangers of vaping. In addition, I called the school to see if parameters could be put in place to prevent him from going to the restrooms to vape. After speaking to the assistant principal, I was even more discouraged and angry. As of this month, the CDC states that vaping is an epidemic. The assistant principal at West also stated it was an epidemic in our schools, yet nothing is being done about it. Please note that I don't blame anyone in particular because this is something that all schools face. That said, why haven't parents been notified that this was an epidemic in our schools? A response from a Sunshine Request stated that there have been no assemblies or education on this topic for over 2 years, yet students are vaping in the restrooms and in their cars daily. I work with troubled youth through the Eastern Jackson County Youth Court Diversion Program, and the majority of those kids that come through the program are there because of vaping. And I can assure you that there are economical and practical ways of helping our students.
There are vaping sensors, much like a fire detector, that you can put into the restrooms that sends an alert when a student is vaping. However, studies have shown the best way to combat this epidemic is through educating the students about vaping, what vaping does to their bodies. We spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on equity, and over the last 4 years, it only has divided our schools and our community. We also frivolously spend money on programs like Panorama. It costs $586,000 each year. Why are we not putting any resources towards facing this epidemic for our kids? This speaks directly to the priorities of LSR7. Equity programs and surveys should not be more important than the health, safety, and education of our children. As a concerned parent, I want to know what this district is going to do about it. What I can tell you is that myself and other parents in this community want to know, and we are willing to help. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Next up, we have Ron Freeman.
Good evening, Mr. Buck. There we go. It's on now. Is that better? Good. Thank you very much. So about 3 years ago, our superintendent, in a conversation with the Kansas City Star, declared that our community was racist. And since that time, this district has spent literally hundreds of thousands of dollars, not over $1 million, in training staff to deal with this problem. Last month, this board agreed to continue down that path. And I ask you, is it succeeding? Are we attaining what has been promised? And are we on the right path to effectively educate students in this district? I would say no. Instead, we have produced an environment that is anti-teacher, anti-student, and anti-education in the name of being anti-racist. There's a reason enrollment at private schools is soaring, and it isn't racism. It's our approach to education. In his I Have a Dream speech, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said this. He said, "But there is something that I must say to my people who stand on the warm threshold which leads into the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. And as the psalmist said, cease from anger, forsake wrath, do not fret, it only causes harm." Our approach contradicts wisdom. We have laid a heavy burden on educators, then we tell them their ethnicity disqualifies them. We have impugned and condemned people as being racist just because of the color of their skin, yet we ignore glaring truths. Educators in this district from all ethnicities love and educate children to the best of their ability every day. Students are inspired by these teachers and the hard work they put in for them. Yet we grab a proverbial megahorn and tell everyone that we can that the system doesn't work for them. We ignore thousands of minorities who have gone through our schools, been thoroughly educated and ready for college, the workplace, and are making the world a better place. We have doctors, lawyers, by the hundreds that come out of this district because we educate students well. We're a good school district. Perhaps instead of continuing on this racially divisive path of shame and condemnation, we should identify what is working and celebrate the teachers that are doing a great job. We should learn from our successes and duplicate them for those who struggle. Doing the right thing leads to right results. Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, is insanity. This approach being crammed down the throats of our community isn't working, and the insanity is destroying the hopes of students and educators alike. Please stop the madness.
Thank you. Next up, we have Heather Crane.
Is this on? Okay. Good evening, Heather Crane, teacher and former president of Lee Summit NEA.
I'm here tonight as a follow-up on the Phase 2 commitment the Board of Education made to many veteran teachers and to clarify this decision, as I served on Team Lee Summit when the process began and supported our veteran teachers in numerous discussions. LSNEA took the lead in asking administration to look into these pay discrepancies. The board committed to Phase 1, granting back years frozen, but also publicly committed to Phase 2, which would grant years of service to veterans who were not given these years of service when hired. We now offer 24 years of experience. I grow weary hearing administrators and those unaffected by this policy change tell me they knew that when they signed their contract, or refer to some ambiguous board policy disqualifying these teachers from receiving their years of service. The commitment for Phase 2 was a teacher's step placement would equal their years of service, period. When Phase 1 and Phase 2 were being discussed and formulated, it was to correct the inequities of those teachers that have given more or all of their teaching career to the students and families in Lee Summit. It has been stated and convoluted that GCBA was discussed in Team Lee Summit, but its impact was never made apparent, and regardless of what GCBA states, the board voted to compensate their veteran teachers fairly anyway. It appears the rules were changed halfway through implementation, and district administration is looking for every avenue to not pay these veteran teachers what is rightfully owed to them. Many of these teachers were harshly dismissed and received letters refusing to hear their appeals. Our veterans have experienced 6 superintendents in 7 years. They were insulted by former leadership, have lived through a pandemic where our classes were doubled some days because we didn't have enough substitutes. Our veterans spent their evenings and personal time writing online lessons for their virtual learners only to turn around and teach in person in their classrooms the very next day. They mentor, they help with classroom management, and they take on the most challenging students. These are the individuals that have carried this district through some of the darkest times we and public education have ever seen. So I ask you, will you follow through with Phase 2 and stay true to your word as you publicly said you would on May 20th, 2021, and again on April 4th, 2022? This district is seeking to ask taxpayers to approve a ballot measure designed to add money to the teacher salary schedule. While this is much needed, and I appreciate and commend the board for taking this initiative, I would also urge the board to keep its promise and fix Phase 2 as part of establishing competitive salaries for its longtime veterans. I ask administration to be fully transparent and to clarify if this ballot issue also includes large pay raises for administrators in this district. I am very doubtful taxpayers would pass such a measure if it included excessive administrative raises without compensating these veteran teachers. Bottom line, a promise made to our veteran teachers should be a promise kept. Their experience should be reflected in their pay. They should not be penalized for devoting much of their professional career to the students and families of Lee Summit. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Madison Grubbs.
Hello, my name is Madison Grubbs. You probably think I am here to talk about mental health, which I am, because I am not the type that speaks about something once and then walks away. I'm the type that speaks up until something gets done. I get that from my mom. I've talked about organizations to put into the schools to help mental health, but you haven't. You have, however, signed a contract for a school-based health center with Burrell Behavioral Health last year. Now, I've done my research. The contract says at first it's only for teachers and staff. However, if you dig a little deeper, it says it's accessible to families, staff, and students. Burrell staff will also have access to medication and treatments. So does that mean a student can be prescribed medication? Will their parents know about it? Do their parents have to give permission? They will also have access to student information system. Can Burrell look at any student records? Can Burrell see the SEL survey responses on Panorama platform? Can Panorama see the files from Burrell? I'm pretty sure you're not setting your students up for success.
Next up, we have Stacy Myers.
My name is Stacy Myers. This is my 31st year in public education. Currently, I'm a social studies teacher at Lee Summit West, and I'm back. As previously stated, I tried to work through the process and keep this Phase 2 discrepancy conversation private, but that didn't happen, so I'm speaking out in public again. However, I am not just asking you to listen, but rather to actually take action and issue me the new corrected contract, and honestly, time is of the essence. The board clearly recognizes there is a problem where the new contract I was issued last summer for an additional year would not have happened. But for some reason, you just won't fully commit to fixing the problem. All the while, the voting public thinks this is resolved. The impact of this situation is embarrassing, demoralizing, disheartening, and at times frustrating infuriating, as an employee. For a district that prides itself on valuing its teaching staff, the mixed message is difficult. I still believe it was the intent of the board to ensure that all teachers' placement on the salary scale matches their years of experience. Further evidence to support this claim can be found in the May 19, 2021 finance meeting, where Board Member Campbell asks if doing this would essentially prevent this problem in the future. Dr. Buck then replies, quote, "By the end of phase 2, everyone's years of experience will match or exceed their step," end quote. Ladies and gentlemen, phase 2 was implemented last spring, and I can honestly tell you that I do not meet or exceed my experience step. I am still 2 years off, and the long-term impact on my family budget is substantial. I, and I assume you as well, believe that a promise made should be a promise kept. Please hear me. I am not asking for special treatment or privilege. I'm not asking you for last-minute extra credit. I am simply seeking to be fairly compensated for what should be my correct salary placement. Resolving this financially is in no way a hardship for the district. We all know that. Now, I promise you, I would not be standing before you tonight had I not been told for 2 years that implementing phase 1 and phase 2, the board would have this discrepancy eliminated. I listened to you. I trusted you. I believed you, and I voted for you. All the while, you promised that all eligible employees would get this correction. The board did not include any, quote, policy qualifiers in this employee communication that would eliminate or that would limit my step placement. According to very clear language combined with your employee and public communications, I qualify. Reread what you sent to us. Reread what you told us. District administration has made it clear that you're the decision makers. Therefore, I respectfully ask you to follow through on what was promised. A promise made should be a promise kept. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up, we have Pinky Arianes.
Hi, my name is Anastasia Arianes. I go by Pinky. I originally was planning on kind of piggybacking on Corey's statement. And when my daughter is getting letters saying that she is missing too many hours or has too many tardies, and I'm having to talk her into going to school to where she does not feel safe, does not want to be pressured into smoking in the bathrooms. There is a different issue that came up this week that I'd rather speak about, and I'm going to let this girl take my remaining time because a lot of these young ladies are having sexual harassment and going to the staff and asking for help and are being minimalized. And that is not a good example. So I'm going to let her have.
Well, I respect your statement, we'd like to ask you to be the speaker as you signed up, please.
They're not going to let you. Do you want me to read it?
Read it all.
Oh my gosh, I guess I don't even have bifocals big enough for this. Dear God. Can she just read her statement that she sent you? Why? Can we come back at another time and you here? Well, I'll sign her up.
No, I'm not waiting until next month.
I can't read that. All right.
I'm gonna read it.
I'm sorry, ma'am. No, I'm not gonna.
All right. Is there a way that we can address this issue at some other time? She has sent you emails. I believe that our girls are having
This
really
isn't a discussion with the board at this time for public comments. If you'd like to finish your statement, that would be fine. Otherwise, there are different means to move forward with that. Thank you.
All right. That's as good as it gets, sweetheart. But you've made yourself known. Okay.
Thank you.
We'll continue to go with our avenues.
Thank you. Next up, we have. Thank you. Next up, we have Kristen Grubbs.
My name is Kristen Grubbs, and I'm here to readdress an issue I spoke on last December before the board. Since 2006, the state of Missouri has had a law in place that makes furnishing pornographic materials to minors illegal. So we're all clear, in Section 573.01, Missouri law defines pornographic for minors as any material or performance if the following applies. A, the average person applying contemporary and community standards would find that the material or performance taken as a whole has a tendency to cater or appeal to a prurient interest of minors. And B, the material or performance depicts or describes nudity, sexual conduct, the condition of human genitals when in a state of sexual stimulation or arousal, or sadomasochistic abuse in a way which is patently offensive to the average person applying contemporary adult community standards with respect to what is suitable for minors. And C, the material or performance taken as a whole lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value for minors. Last December, when the board was reviewing the book All Boys Aren't Blue, the board utilized the Merriam-Webster definition of pornography as opposed to Missouri's legal definition. For more clarity, Missouri's definitions continue, saying, furnish is to issue, sell, give, provide, lend, mail, deliver, transfer, circulate, disseminate, present, exhibit, or otherwise provide. Sexual conduct is actual or simulated, normal or perverted acts of human masturbation, deviant sexual intercourse or physical contact with a person's clothed or unclothed genitals, pubic area, buttocks, or the breast of a female in an act of apparent sexual stimulation or gratification, or any sadomasochistic abuse or acts including animals or any latent objects in an act of apparent sexual stimulation or gratification. For those of you who deny this as an issue in our libraries, I pose these questions. What if I told you the very book our school board voted unanimously to retain last December explicitly details a scene when the author was 13 years old being molested by his older teenage cousin, literal but vivid accounts of oral sex, physical stimulation of genitals, and masturbation? What if I told you there were other books in our district, like this one by Heather Corinne, that details all forms of sex, including masturbation, cunnilingus, fellatio, analingus, sexting, phone sex, BDSM, kinky sex, role-playing, sex toys, even body fluid and blood play? If we were to put the images detailed in these books into film, they would be X-rated. Yet we're allowing them in our school libraries. These books are just a sampling of what is currently available in some of our schools. Board members, you are legally included as responsible parties.
Thank
Are you
you.
willing to risk the
Our next
consequences
speaker-
of a Class
thank
A
you.
misdemeanor?
Our next
I
speaker
implore
is,
you to remove
thank
the
you.
pornography.
Our next speaker is Christy Engman.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Christy Engeman, and I am the mother of 2 children in our elementary schools here in Lee Summit. And my statement tonight is regarding the equity work that needs to continue in our district and provide examples of how evident that is. My first question is equity still a priority, and if so, what progress has been made? What part of the equity plan is being addressed with the dignity and belonging focus? I have concerns with the lack of transparency that each school has an individualized dignity plan. Who is helping to ensure that the plans are appropriate for each school, and how is implementation of the plan and success going to be tracked and reported? And what progress has been made regarding diverse hiring? I wanted to take this time to focus on this last question and address some comments that I've heard in the community in which we live that I know you all hear as well. I want to remind you how divisive these types of comments are and how glaring of an example they are to just how large of a problem this is. The comment I'm referring to was made on social media after the last board's working session. The comment stated, "What's wrong with black kids if they can only learn from teachers who look like them? White and Asian kids don't seem to have that problem." The absurdity and hate behind a comment like that is why our equity work within our school district is so important. If that thought process is felt by even a minority in our community, imagine the detriment that has on all of our children and their future success in life. I'd like to remind you why having a diverse staff is paramount. It's for reasons like the one that follows. It's for my then 6-year-old daughter who experienced her first racial aggression at school during her kindergarten recess, when a little boy told her he wouldn't play with her because she was brown. She held that in all day until she got home because there was no one at school for her who looked like her that she could tell what happened. She didn't trust that another adult who didn't look like her would understand and wouldn't judge her. Put yourself in a similar situation. If you are experiencing something personal, who do you look to confide in and seek understanding from? Someone who has experienced something similar, or someone who you fear may judge you because they haven't experienced the same situation? How can anyone argue that my daughter wouldn't have felt more comfortable, more confident, more of a sense of belonging if there were adults within her school that looked like her? If she had an adult that looked like her to turn to for understanding for those hard moments? How can anyone expect a student to be able to learn at the best of their abilities when they're feeling less than others around them? We cannot continue to expect our children to achieve at their highest levels possible when they do not feel comfortable in their own skin.
Moving on now to 5.01, we'll have our board reports or meetings attended. And I think this evening we'll start with Board Member Eslick.
Put me on the spot. Okay. Okay. All right. So attended a couple of meetings that I guess I get to get Roderick off the hook over here because one of them was with Board Member Sparks. We did attend the Board Policy Committee meeting together, and I'm sorry I don't have that one pulled up right now. So you did put me on the spot because now I don't have all my notes pulled up. Okay, I'm going to move on to, so from a Board Policy Committee meeting, nothing significant to report out of that meeting other than we reviewed several chunks of policies, which is a large charge of that meeting is just to go through and review a certain set of policies every time we meet, just to get us another set of eyes on those policies and make sure there's nothing that we need to address. We found a couple of typos, so we did address some of those. We didn't have a Lee Summit Education Foundation meeting this month because there were several Education Foundation events that had happened. So in an effort not to exhaust the board, that was not a meeting that we did have. But there were several events, one of which being the Race for the Future, which was a fairly successful event. There was a slight decline from previous years, but that was actually on par with kind of the national averages for registrations in races in general. So I don't think there was any cause for alarm, but that event was a lot of fun, very successful, and several board members did attend that. I know I saw Board President Campbell, Vice President Fritchie, and I think that was it. And then I was there too. So we had the Finance Committee, myself, and Board President Campbell, which I will discuss later. We won't go into detail there. And lastly, actually second to lastly, this month, Board Member Foley and I visited several elementary schools, which was really amazing. I love getting the opportunity to kind of meet with the staff and hear from them and just see our students in action and our educators in action. We visited Richardson, Hazel Grove, Trail Ridge, and Cedar Creek, and we really appreciate the time that those administrators took to kind of show us around and tell us what they love about their buildings. So that was a lot of fun. Lastly, I just have to wish our Summit Lakes cross country and Pleasantly Middle School cross country teams good luck because they're running their first state competition this Saturday. And I only know that because the Summit Lakes cross country team coach reached out to me after Race for the Future and asked if I would come and run with his team on Tuesday. So Monday, excuse me. So of course I said yes. So I went and ran with them and it was super fun. Those kids are amazing. Not only are they excellent athletes, but it was just so fun getting to see how encouraging they were with each other and to me. I got compliments on my shoes. They said good job. It was really fun. So good luck to them. I can't wait to hear how they do. I hope they crush it. It's their first time running 2 miles. I think typically in the middle school setting, they run 1. So good luck and thank you. I'm sure none of them are listening. Hopefully they're all, doing homework or sleeping or something. So, and that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Board Member Murdoch.
With no school tomorrow, it's wishful thinking that they're doing homework or sleeping. I have a feeling if they're like my kids, they're probably playing video games at this point. So I was out of town most of the first part of the month, so I don't have anything actually, except that I did watch your guys' work session on October 6th. So I'll have some comments there too. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Board Member Sparks.
All right. So first, I would like to acknowledge Mrs. Wiley Brown. I was able to go to that celebration of life, and that was wonderful to see the representation from our district. And I know Board President, we were here. We were there in support of that family. Let's continue to lift up those children and then also her husband while they're going through this difficult time. I was able to join a lot of my colleagues to go over to the Pipes Fitter Union 533 to be able to just see the real world learning, their training facility. It was wonderful and awesome, and it's just another avenue in the workforce that if our students desire to do that, that would be a great partnership. And I know that there's some conversations that are taking place to where we could benefit, and our students certainly can benefit from that. One of the things that I think was probably the most shocking was it was a $60 class a year. Class to be able to get your certification from an apprenticeship. So I thought that was major. Also, Elected Officials Day, got to participate. That was awesome. Dr. Buck kind of mentioned that. Team Lee Summit, the only thing I'm going to highlight to my colleagues is many of you did reach out to me wanting to kind of gauge some additional information with the Team Lee Summit survey that goes out. The committee at large felt that it would be beneficial if we had a secondary survey that would go out, and so the board is going to kind of get to have a little bit more input in what those questions look like to kind of gauge some of the information that we are desiring of what our staff is wanting to tell us. Also, policy committee, board member Islick shared that. We went through policies AD, and then also we went through the case series of KB through KNAJ with Dr. Carlson, and so that was wonderful to review those policies. And there'll be some changes that'll come down the pipeline. Also, Lee Summit, Lee Summit Elementary. I got to go see Lee Summit Elementary. I had meetings, and so literally I called Miss Linda at the last minute and said, hey, can you get me in somewhere? And so Lee Summit Elementary, I was able to go over there. Listen, they are small, but they are mighty. I fell in love with that school. It was on my list to be there in my first year, but it was happy, and there's not too many schools that make you cry. That school made me cry, just seeing the great work that's happening on those grounds, and so it was great to be there. I also was at the Miller Park Homecoming Barbecue. That is always fun, and I feel like I belong here when I can call the kid's name and they know who I am. And so that was awesome to be there for a second year in a row. Also, President Campbell, and also Board Member Marshall, we are preparing for our presentation on behalf of our district at the MSBA conference. We did an equity toolkit that the full board participated in, and they are going to allow us to represent them. And so we've kind of been preparing so that we do well. And so that also happened. And then lastly, October the 19th, you should have received an email. This is my report from MSBA delegation. me and President Campbell are the delegates that represents LSR7. There is the handbook and the changes that are going to be recommended upon that we will be voting on. And so if there's opposition or if there's things that you would like us to carry that in when we vote, please make sure that you reach out to us prior to the 4th so that when we go in there that we are actually doing our due diligence and that's representing us as a full board. That's my report.
Thank you, great. Vice President Fritchie?
Thank you. Thought you were going to work from that end and back. First of all, I'd like to report on the business roundtable meeting that we had on October 3rd. We did have a great cross-section of our business community in the room to listen to a presentation on salaries in LSR7 and the possibility of a levy transfer or a Prop C full waiver on the April 2023 ballot. The BRT was in unanimous favor of a levy transfer from the bond fund to the operational fund to support staff salaries. 2 members said they would also support a Prop C full waiver. So this is just one of the 3 groups that we asked Dr. Buck to consult with before we made a decision on where we would go. So that group is in favor of the levy transfer. Roderick already mentioned one thing that happened in Team Lee Summit. I'm going to go a little bit further on that. At that meeting, keeping in mind, folks, that this is our group consisting of employees representing every employee classification in the district. We listened to a report from Dr. Buck and then provided feedback again on the levy transfer or the Prop C full waiver on the April ballot. That team was strongly in favor of a levy transfer. Then our CFO, Nathan Holder, reviewed the current and the future budget outlook for LSR7 and provided us some insight into how that will affect our ability to increase salaries. And he's going to bring us some more information at the next meeting. They asked for some sample salary schedules and that sort of thing. The team finalized the Team Lee Summit survey instrument that does go out for all staff members for this year and determined the timeline for distribution of that survey. And that's when Board Member Sparks asked the question about the additional survey about letting board members have some help input on that. So thank you for that. Then October 13th and the 18th, I attended meetings for the middle school athletics and activity strategic plan. There was great input and diversity in this meeting, which included staff, parents, and students. And I just need to give kudos to Ron Alexander. He did a masterful job of facilitating, along with many of the administrators who are in this room tonight, as well as some school administrators. The small group discussions were productive. They helped that team reach its goal, which was a good strategic plan going forward to facilitate, promote, and grow participation in all of our middle school activities and athletics. And so I just really have to give Mr. Alexander kudos for that. I think most of the other things I attended have been mentioned here tonight: the Miller Park Barbecue, the elected officials breakfast, the Pipe Fitters Union headquarters visit. The 3 of us did the pre-TIF meeting at City Hall. Board Member Marshall, President Campbell, and I went to the pre-TIF meeting. And I did not get to be at the actual city TIF meeting because on October 17th, I attended the Missouri State Teacher of the Year recognition banquet in Jefferson City and saw our LSR7 Teacher of the Year, Holly Dawn, receive her semifinalist award from our Commissioner of Education, Margie Van Dieven. And she had a really great support system there. I need to call out to Dr. Brett Potts back there, Dr. David Mitchell, her principal, several of her friends, and my husband and I all went and we filled up a table to support Holly getting her semifinalist award. So that was a lot of fun to watch that happen. And another fun thing I got to do this last month, I just have to give a shout out. Lee Summit High School asked me to be a judge for their homecoming parade, and that was super fun. So I did that on September 30th. So anyway, thanks a lot, and I appreciate all of our board members going to all these things together. I don't think people realize how many things we get invited to and how many things we go to, every month. Thanks.
Thank you. Board Member Marshall.
Thank you. So I attended the Lee Summit Cares meeting this past Monday, and the three things that they have happening. The first is the Youth Advisory Board meeting, otherwise formed called YAB. They're meeting October 25th at 6 o'clock at the Colburn Library, and that is open to 8th through 12th graders. And then we have the Drug Take Back, which is October 29th. Will be from 10 to 2 p.m. They're still in need of volunteers for that, so if you're interested in volunteering, you can just either let me know or contact Lee Summit Cares directly. They'll be picking up or collecting at the Lee Summit Police Department, the Lee Summit Medical Center, and John Knox Village. And the final thing from Lee Summit Cares is the Mayor's Character Breakfast. Tickets are on sale. That breakfast is January 26th, so get your tickets while they are available. And I did attend the TIF committee hearing also this past Monday, where we had a hearing and we voted to forward the TIF project, otherwise known as Discovery Park, to the City Council, so that they can vote on that in the next month or so. So keep your eyes on City Council and see what they do with this next project.
All right, thank you. Board Member Foley.
Thank you. So along with the 4 school visits that I attended with Board Member Eslick, I attended the Citizens Advisory Committee meeting. In that meeting, Dr. Buck provided a recap on the 2 ballot options he presented at the September 20th meeting and answered questions. CAC members broke into small groups to consider what ballot option to formally recommend to the board. 3 groups were unanimous in their decision to recommend that the Board of Education ask voters for a no tax increase debt service levy on the April 2023 ballot. Members cited the no tax impact as a primary reason for their recommendation. They explained the role of the Building Our Futures campaign group and how the group has historically mobilized voters around the R7 ballot issues as a committee separate from the CAC and not funded by the district. It was explained how interested CAC members can get involved if a BOF group forms ahead of the April election. I volunteered for this position, but was informed afterwards that I was not needed, so I will be looking at other objects or projects to get involved with this next week. Thank you.
All right, and thank you. And so I did a couple of school tours, one with Board Member Eslick and Board Member Foley, visiting Hazel Grove. So thank you so much to Kristen Merrill and Dr. Kinney, who helped us with the tour. I also visited Meadow Lane, and thank you to Dr. J and to all the folks at Meadow Lane. I got the opportunity to read to a classroom of kindergartners, and there is no better way to start your day than reading a book to a group of kindergartners. That was awesome. Attended the pipe fitters tour. Thank you to our legislators that attended, and to our legislators that weren't able to attend. I just want to say, understand that you have busy calendars, but we would love to take you on a school tour. So please reach out to us, and we'd be happy to organize and do a school tour and get you in our school buildings. Also, attended the board leadership meeting, our CAC meeting, as Board Member Foley mentioned, our business roundtable. It is exciting to see all the folks engaged across our community that are helping us with information and community-wide sharing of the good news of LSR7. So I really appreciate all the folks that participate ongoing on those committees. Also, I had the opportunity to sit in the first Parent Academy session and share a little bit about what it means to be a board member. So leveraging my own training that we have for our new board orientation, leveraging our MSBA training, I shared out with that team of people about being a board member. I went to the Miller Park Homecoming Barbecue, and I need to follow up because I do want to take a tour of Miller Park. I'm excited about the upcoming work that we'll be doing there as well. I sat with the TIF Commission with Board Member Marshall, and I also sat on the strategic planning for the high school athletics and activities plan. And I do want to thank all the parents, all the students, all the many administrators that sat in and helped Ron organize and work on all of that information. That energy of that committee was huge. And so what an honor to just sit in and see all of those people doing the hard work to make sure that this district continues to be a leader, not just in our education and what we do in the classrooms, but also throughout our activities and athletics, and getting all of our students engaged in that as well. So that was very exciting. I also had the opportunity to talk with an old friend from high school, Don Greenwell, who is the head of the Builders Association, and met with Dr. Buck and Shannon Booth to see how we can take a tour at the Builders Association and see how we can get engaged with them also for our students in our real world learning opportunities. So exciting, and I would invite, as soon as that gets scheduled, any of our board members that would like to attend that tour as well. So, and I went to the Race for the Future, although I didn't get invited to run with anybody. That's probably good, but I'm happy to walk with whoever. But that was an exciting event as well, and I just want to thank the community always for supporting our Lee Summit Educational Foundation, and what a fun morning as well. We thought it was going to be freezing. For the runners, I don't think it was as cold, but it turned out to be just a beautiful day, so that was a lot of fun.
And board member Eslick actually made a commercial with her kids for Race for the Future, and it's on the LSEF page. If you haven't seen it, you need to see it. It's really good.
Yes.
Yeah, that was really fun. I won't
Awesome.
lie.
Awesome. All right, moving now to our finance, item 6.01. We'll have board member Eslick.
Okay, thank you. So the Finance Committee meeting this month, which was yesterday morning, we reviewed our contracts under $15,000 and also separately reviewed our contracts over $15,000, both of which are part of our consent agenda. So I'll highlight a couple that we discussed that are over $15,000. The first one is the Hilliard Inc. contract, which this is simply a contract for our district to essentially have an on-call contractor to be able to refinish our wood gym floors. So it's a one-year contract that can renew up to 4 years per square footage contract. That way, they just kind of bill as they go, but at a predefined amount. So that's not a bad deal. The second is IXL, which is a resource that is currently being used for core curriculum in math for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And this additional contract is for those schools that also wanted to utilize and explore this resource for other subject matters like ELA, social studies, to be used as a supplemental curriculum. That's distinguished from the math component of IXL being part of our core curriculum. So it's kind of an elective opportunity that we're supporting our buildings in approving with those contracts. Next is Heartland Solutions. This is something that's going to help support our nutrition services. So they already use Heartland Solutions for their back-end services, but this is really going to take the load off of the operations that are happening with our local servers, which are actually presenting some issues for the functionality of our nutrition services. It's a little bit clunky for them. There's some slowdowns. It's having some trouble integrating from our servers with things like our My School Bucks and our free and reduced lunch application system. So this contract will just kind of help streamline things, because what ends up happening for like a student impact level is that it's making the meal lines flow slower, which if you know anything about our meals, time frames are very tight. So giving our kids more time to eat their food is very important. So this monetary increase is very small, really. I think it's about $16,000 is what it increases total expenses for this program for our nutrition services. Fits within the budget, but it's going to help our students and our nutrition services operate more smoothly. The next one is Zuzu. I hope I said that right, but I'm not sure I did. This is part of our, this is actually the name that falls Google Suite falls under. So this is really just going to support our remote learning services as well as some of the key features that fall into our Google offering that is utilized by our educators in the classroom, such as Google Docs, Google Sheets, Drive, all of those things. So that's what this contract supports. Outside of those contracts over 15,000, the other topics that we discussed briefly, but will be part of our conversation later in the board meeting, has to do with our geometry and construction, robotics construction contract. The administration has recommended the Newkirk Novak to provide 7,000 square feet, a 7,000 square foot new building. I don't know why that's hard for me to say, at Lee Summit North and Lee Summit West high schools, and an interior renovation and building addition at the Lee Summit High School to support these programs. So that, in addition to the Paradise Park site programs construction contract, are up for discussion at the end of this board meeting. At last month's meeting, the board awarded the contract to Universal Construction for base bid number 1 for Paradise Park. And that base bid number 1 was what was originally part of the 2020 bond. So the site program and the geometry and construction and robotics construction contracts are both outside of the scope of what was originally promised to the voters in the 2020 bond. So these two projects and the opportunity to move forward with those, subject to board approval, is really made possible by good fiscal management by our administrative teams here, and good investments and returns on our bond funds. So it's a good position to be in, to be able to have those opportunities for discussion. And lastly, we reviewed our bond report, and everything is moving right on track. We will need a transfer of funds this month for the first time in fiscal year 2023 of $2,649,352.05. We reviewed our revenue and expense reports, and our current operating fund balance is about 24%, which is only slightly lower simply because, we're pending our tax revenue that will come in towards the end of the year. So we still are in great financial shape, as Mr. Holder assures us every month when he so adequately reviews our expense reports. And that is all I have. Can I get a motion to approve our transfer? Oh, do I do it?
Would you like to make the
Oh, I'm
motion?
sorry.
Yeah, that's great.
See, I always have to review this process with you every
It's
time.
all good. We're a team.
Okay. Let me do that then. I move to approve the transfer of $2,649,352.05 from the general fund to the special revenue fund.
Second. All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, raise your right hand and say aye.
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 Motion carries.
I move to approve the treasurer's report and payment of the bills.
Second. All those in favor, raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. All right. We'll move now to our items for consent. Item number 7. And can I get a motion around our items for consent?
I move to approve the consent agenda items as presented.
Second.
All right. Ms. Ismark, can we do a roll call vote? Thank you.
Board Member Murdoch?
Aye.
Vice President Fritchie? Board Member Marshall?
Aye.
Board Member Sparks? Board Member Foley?
Aye.
Board Member Eslick?
Aye.
President Campbell?
Aye. All right, motion carries. We'll move to item 8.01, and this is our geometry and construction and robotics construction contract. All right, Dr. Sheldon, thank you.
All right, good evening, thank you. This is a project that our district has considered for quite some time. It's a wonderful project. As you know, we are one of the nation's leaders in our robotics program, as well as very innovative in how we approach instruction and our geometry and construction program initiative is that next step for us. You know we have AMP amped up on algebra. That next step is that geometry and construction. We put this project out for bid. As bids and responses to bids are going these days, it came in higher than we had originally budgeted. We've had discussions about how to handle that, and some of that will come from what we had budgeted for general capital improvements from our bond proceeds. So we bring this forward to you tonight in hopes that you will approve it so that we can move forward with these projects.
All right, can I get a motion and then we'll have discussion or questions?
I move that the Board of Education approve the award of contract to Newkirk Novak for the construction of geometry robotics project in the amount of $11,196,637.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Does anyone have any questions? Comments? Vice President Fritchie?
I just have no real questions here, Dr. Shelton. It's just a quick comment that I think several months ago we determined that, Lee Summit High School was kind of being left behind because they weren't going to get their practice field like Lee Summit West and Lee Summit Northwood with their new buildings. And I just really appreciate the fact that we have been able to move forward with providing that equitable space for Lee Summit High School students so that they would have the same treatment as Lee Summit North and Lee Summit West. So I'd just like to thank the board. I'd like to thank you all for following through with that, getting the bids, and making sure to ensure that Lee Summit High School gets that equitable space. So thanks a lot to everyone.
We definitely heard the request, and I want to give props to Kyle Gorell, who obviously takes the lead on these projects, and he's done an incredible job working with our architects to make that happen.
I would second that. Thank you, Kyle.
And I would second that comment. I think the thing about robotics that's always exciting to me is being a former robotics parent. I know all the different kids that are engaged and involved in the robotics program. And so it not only feeds the souls of many different kids, but it provides some of that real world learning and the opportunities to use machining and things that they may never get their hands on otherwise. So it's a really exciting program, and I'm really excited about almost every time I talk to somebody in the community about geometry and say, we're moving to also offering construction geometry, they say, why didn't they have that when I was in high school? I hear that over and over and over, and honestly, I feel the same. So I'm really excited to see that program get off the ground. So appreciate, Kyle, all your hard work. Appreciate, Dr. Sheldon, all your hard work as well. Any other questions or comments? Okay, then we'll move on to a vote. Ms. Ismert, can we do a roll call, please?
Vice President Fritchie?
Aye.
Board Member Murdoch?
Aye.
Board Member Marshall?
Aye.
Board Member Sparks? Aye. Board Member Eslick?
Aye.
Board Member Foley?
Aye.
President Campbell?
Aye. Motion carries unanimously, so that item passes. Very exciting. All right, item 8.02, and we have Dr. Barger coming up that will share information, and Dr. Shelton hanging on to share information. When we had our discussion in our last work session, appreciate so much the great information that was shared, the discussion that was had among board members. One ask that we had was, so we know we're doing all the work on the inside at Paradise Park. It's all the land around Paradise Park that we're discussing and voting on tonight, and we wanted to hear a little bit more about what those instructional programs were going to be.
Yep, absolutely appreciate the opportunity as the board is trying to weigh fiscal options with remaining funds. And so as was mentioned earlier, base bid 1 took care of interior, Great Beginnings, early childhood, as well as playground. And what was asked is, as we think about the exterior, and I have outdoor in parentheses because it is outdoor, but it is somewhat connected to the high school classroom that has already been taken care of in base bid 1. What will this look like instructionally in terms of using this outdoor space? There are 3 distinct but connected programs. I think it's important for me to stop and pause and recognize Frank Vogt, who is our LSR7 science curriculum specialist and works closely with Dr. Flack as well as Shannon Booth, the Director of Career Education, because quite honestly, what I'm highlighting here is largely their program design, so much thanks to them. There are 3 distinct but connected programs in this highlighted program. One is a high school environmental education program. One is an elementary unit culminating science field trip project program. Think an in-house Blue Springs School of Economics in the realm of environmental science sort of model, and then a high school hospitality program. The proposed high school environmental education program would be a half-day program similar to an STA format. This course would involve targeted environmental education, including ecosystems, biodiversity, genetic engineering, earth systems and resources in the fall, and a spring course on global environmental education on ecosystems, biodiversity, basically the same across the globe. So what we're talking about as we look at those options is developing a outdoor-based course with outdoor-based spaces, utilizing the pavilion, utilizing what we now know as the firehouse as their space for high school students to earn credit in a way similar to STA. The second option, or the second component, it's not an option, the second component is this elementary use of our outdoor space, in which we would anticipate that approximately 20 days a month in the on-weather months, elementary students would be on site. And again, thinking about that model of field trip model where there's a destination field trip that's culminating as a result of a unit of study in their grades. So in September, every first grade class would go and there would be a wrap-up unit on plant animal superpowers, utilizing the greenhouse and the animal house. The animal house is along with the classroom space in that firehouse space. October, 5th grade would be doing Web of Life with the pond and the nature walk. November, 3rd grade would be flowers focused on the greenhouse, the nature walk, and the butterfly garden. Then it gets cold. And then after it's not cold anymore, 4th grade organization, structure, and function, we would be utilizing 4th graders out there. 2nd grade comes with the changing earth, and then in May we're ready to take our kindergartners out there with the living things, looking at that greenhouse and animal pond. Things like our fishing units, all of those things that we have typically gone other places we would do in-house via this model. And then in addition to that, now to be fair, this hospitality program will most likely stand up with or without the Paradise Park outdoor space. There is some connection potentially through a business partner, through some local development that may be going on. This is currently an approved course, a hospitality program. It provides an industry recognized credential, which is a market value asset that is available. It's not something that we currently offer because programmatically we have had a need for a more systemic way to offer internships, which Paradise Park would allow for us to do. This is what the classroom inside of Paradise Park that's already been taken care of through Base Bid 1 is designed for. The internship hours that are connected to that particular course would involve managing the outdoor recreation resources, such as the go-karts, the mini golf, the batting cages, as well as any events that would be hosted, for example, in the pavilion. Again, that course will stand up with or without that, but that would be another usage for that space. And instead of having to seek external internship hours with business partners, we would be able to provide them on our own. So quick summary of how we would use that external Base Bid 2 space instructionally, and we're open for questions.
All right, what questions do we have? Oh, yeah, thank you. Let's do a motion.
Okay, here's the motion. I move that the Board of Education approve the award of contract to Universal Construction for the Paradise Park Site Programs Project in the amount of $5,206,726.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Now, what questions do we have? Board Member Murdoch.
A couple. Number one is, how does the rotation of elementary students through the outdoor spaces impact the actual curriculum calendar that they have if they're trying to get through from a culminating unit, yet we're using 20 days of the month? Obviously, that means classes are 20 days off in terms of how they're approaching each unit.
I think in the area of science, that's an excellent question. Much like Blue Springs economics, there is going to have to be some of that flexibility. Unlike math, where things necessarily have to be super sequential, on the upfront, teachers would know when their week was, and they would arrange their science units or the placement of their science time. We might have, in some places, they might get 30 minutes of science each day, because that allows us to spread it out over 3 weeks. But if I'm an early class, we might cram's a hard word, we might put together a more condensed version, or compacted version of the same lessons, because we know when we're going. Again, model Blue Springs economics happens pretty easily that same way.
What is essentially, I guess, a liability oversight of us trying to manage students managing go-karts, batting cages, mini golf? How do we even go about that through the hospitality industry in terms of that kind of training?
I'll take that one since Ryan Hall's not here. Ryan worked extensively with music. Be honest with you, their biggest concern was the mini golf, but they've said it's okay. So Ryan Hall pulled and tugged on that last year, so I don't see Ryan here.
So like our current coverage covers that?
Correct.
Okay. What is what's our overall maintenance of the site? Meaning, without this project, what does the site look like outside, just from an upkeep standpoint, regardless of what we do? From a mowing standpoint, planting standpoint, just general, what's the site going to look like even without this project?
So are you saying if we don't do the project, what would we do with this site as far as?
Well, yeah, what would it look like? Am I going to walk up and see weeds all over it? What would we see?
Weeds either way. I mean, we will maintain this property as we do all property that we own. So we'll put it in our rotation for grounds, landscaping, general upkeep, all those normal maintenance routines that we follow in all of our buildings and properties, we'd follow here as well.
So then the follow-up to that would be, is the pond is there?
Yes.
Sorry, I meant the water features are there. Young kids could still access those without this base bid. Would that be still possible for students to still come out to the site?
On their own?
With their teachers? No.
Oh, with their. So we will.
I mean, my kids would do that, but
we will secure the site.
I'm just asking, even without the actual project, the ponds and the walking areas around the outdoor features, especially a class like kindergartners, would still be able to come with their teachers as a part of a unit and still have access to many of the same objectives that they would have regardless of if we did the project.
So potentially, but it would not have the same equity access. So part of the project is a dock and access to the water. Right now, they're literally water features to hold water on the campus and not used as a activity in Paradise Park. So in order to use them as a Paradise Park equitably, we have some work to do to them.
So they're almost more like retention at this particular point, right? The ponds are almost more like retention that from an access standpoint. Okay. I'm going to reserve comment here until other people talk. So.
Okay. Board Member Fritchie?
Yes, thank you, President Campbell. I have a couple of questions. First of all, the elementary units, they run from September through May with that little break for, like you pointed out, Dr. Barger, the winter. I was just wondering, would there also be the possibility of utilizing this space in the summertime for our summer school students?
Absolutely. I think one of the opportunities for the hospitality team and or our curricular team would be to talk about, everything from summer school to summer camps to, does the Y want to work? Some of this, to be fair, is the conceptual instructional design of what we hope that place to be and how we best plan to see the instructional connection. But yes, I think everything from facility rental at that pavilion for events could be open to our community. There's lots of opportunities there.
Right. Well, that's what one of my follow-up questions was for the hospitality program. Would they be operating in the summertime also? Would the students be able to, if they're not connected to a class, are our community continues to ask, are we going to be able to go use the go-karts? Are we going to be able to use the, like in the spring, summer, fall, the batting cages? Those batting cages have been really missed, I understand, by quite a few groups. Are we going to be able to utilize that somehow, or maybe even hire some of our kids who we have trained in the hospitality program to continue working that program throughout the summer to keep that open so our community can come take advantage of some of those?
Yeah, I mean, I think any of those options are fair. We could run a summer school section of that course, but I think more likely that looks like students who've experienced that course applying for and taking on a paid role in a similar way that we do maybe at like the Aquatic Center or places like that where we would have students who are also employees.
Great. And then the hospitality program, would those students do all, like you said, for the pavilion, for different places, the catering, would they arrange for
They
that?
would be, yes, they would be facilitating that work, and there are various components, and certainly others can speak to the more technical pieces of that IRC, that industry recognized certificate. But to be clear, that they very much are about what is the food, what is the quantity, what is our capacity, how do we organize, almost like a general contractor would work on a construction project.
Like a business plan too, and figuring costs and maybe working with our nutrition services department and that kind of thing.
Or outdoor, all of.
I can see so many connections. This is amazing. Yes. Thank you.
Great. Board Member Eslick?
Thank you so much for putting this together to let us know everything that was going to happen, because I know there were a lot of questions at our last work session about that. So I love all the programs. I think this looks really great. I still kind of go back to some of my concerns that's really are more for questions for Dr. Shelton. And I'm not sure that I have questions because it's the same concerns that I had during our work session. But when we go back, I just pulled up our option C from our work session, which was the option of the list that concerns me is the deferring capital improvement projects for the flooring, furniture, and roofing. So can you just refresh my memory on what we would be deferring when it comes to capital improvements? Because I still have some concern there to move money to a project that is wonderful, and I think it's great, and I think it will benefit our students, but is more of a want than a need. And so I'm concerned about what needs we might be deferring. So can you just kind of refresh my memory on some of that?
So in all budgets, you have lots of needs, and typically your resources don't always meet your needs. And so we're always in a position where we have to prioritize. And in each of these cases, we would prioritize those roofs, that furniture, that flooring that has the greatest need. Now, how much is that going to be? We would scale it out. Now, also, the other side of it is, can we generate other resources, such as can we transfer more from our Fund 1 into our Fund 4 to help cover some of these costs? And so those are questions we will answer as you move through the budgeting process. But there will be some deferring of some of these projects, but it will not be at an expense to us being able to safely maintain our educational environment. I also would want to remind you, our hope is to come to the board and to come to our community in 2025, and which isn't far off, and request some additional bond funds, which we then can put forward toward those deferred projects. So we're talking a fairly short amount of time to get to that opportunity.
Okay, I appreciate that. Just one more question. So if is there, just say if the group feels that there's not enough information, or if they want to have further discussion, how long is our bid good for? What is the implication of tabling that conversation if that were to happen? Not saying it will, but I'm just hypothetical.
I'll answer the second one first. We need to be able to open this in August. We need to get going. And so, obviously, the board has the discretion to table if they choose. It would set us back if we don't act tonight. So would ask that we do take action tonight. A If I recall, Kyle, when we were speaking with Universal, we were coming toward the end of our timeline to hold this pricing. So,
Thank you.
So to answer your question, if we were to table it, I think we would be past that timeline with Universal.
So decision has to be made. Gotcha.
This is decision night, yes.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Board Member Sparks?
I would like to make a motion to table this. No.
Dude.
No, listen. No, so just real quick, I just had to lighten up the mood. Come on, laugh. So how many kids is this facility is going to impact again?
So the elementary, it would be all sixth grade. So you're talking over, 7,000 students around there would be accessing the facility. High school courses, they're both going to be probably a classroom worth of kids. So, 30 kids in each one of those two programs. And Kyle, do you mind coming up? I'm trying to remember, is the greenhouse part of this? I don't know if it is part of this one because I know she mentioned the greenhouse. I think that's above and beyond this bid. So I just wanted to check on that piece.
I will also say that we have had some preliminary conversations, even as recently as the last couple of days, about the possibility of accessing some greenhouse options that may be a partnership related that just came in my email this morning.
Yes, a greenhouse is not specifically a part of this project, although we are including water from the main building out to the pavilion that would run by the proposed greenhouse location. I would say, though, that greenhouses are many times more of an equipment purchase that are more separate. So we've got a really nice pad, that gravel pad that had a storage tent on it that was planned for a greenhouse that would be real easy if we, through capital funds can add that in. That would be relatively easy to do so.
Thank you for that clarity. Can I ask one more clarity? Eventually, where the outdoor laser tag, for everybody who's been to Paradise Park many times, the goal is eventually to make it an enclosed butterfly area, but that's also not part of this bid. I just want to make sure we're 100% clear what's in this bid and what's not.
That's correct. No butterfly garden, but someday a butterfly garden.
Okay, Board Member Murdoch? Oh, I'm sorry, Board Member Sparks.
My other question is, I value the support that the community still wants to use this facility as a recreational facility, but I think it's important to remind us that the purpose of this facility is to support our students in LSR7 for our little learners, our education, and then also for our elementary students to be able to utilize the facilities and the outside of these facilities. And so while I would be in support of the extracurricular things that will go on, I want that to be the focal point of this project. And so I support that completely.
Great, thank you. Board Member Murdoch?
If there's other people who want to talk, feel free. I'm just going to give my overall comment. This is based on your guys' discussion in the work session too, so just a heads up since I wasn't able to attend that. I'm not sure that it's good to say how many students this is going to impact when we say whether or not this is positive or not. We always want to impact students, but I would argue that maintenance throughout the district impacts thousands upon thousands of students who maybe don't see it, right? Parents will definitely see it. Students will feel it within comfort. It could be as basic as LED lights in the ceiling that no longer glare so kids actually want to read. So I would always say that when we talk about deferring maintenance throughout the district, that we at least acknowledge that for everything that we say that it's going to help on the front end of what we actually visually are going to be able to see, I would argue that maintenance throughout the district on the back end is something that impacts students, staff, parents, everybody. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, and just for clarification for anybody who may end up watching this, we will have a capital budget no matter what. I get that. We're essentially deciding, do we want $5 million extra dollars essentially in the capital budget, 5.2. That's really the basic decision here. I would contend, And to use Dr. Shelton's point, actually, I would contend that we are better off to push this project into the 25 bond rather than trying to push and maintenance projects into then an upcoming bond issue. We have maintenance needs throughout the district. We have escalating construction costs, maintenance costs, energy costs, everything that goes along with it. We have Paradise Park that's going to come online, which is what we promised the voters we would do. The rest of the site is still going to be maintained, even if we don't have the project. We have a negative balance that will show up in our capital projects fund by fiscal year 25, if you guys saw the answers to the questions within the packet. And the reason that becomes something for me is when we talk about, well, how do we replace those funds? One of the options is a general fund transfer. Well, if the general fund transfer is the option to replace the fund, then we should be pushing this to the bond issue and moving these funds into the capital project so that we can actually get all those things done. It's very rare that as you guys probably know, that I would say, hey, project that we talk about benefits students, not supporting. But in this particular case, I don't support this option. I think that we should be moving the $5 million over into maintenance because we do not know what is coming from maintenance projects within our building. Outside of, we have the long-range plan. I'm not meaning that, but there's funds that are going to need, that we need, whether it be some of our older buildings, whether it be huge roofing projects that instead of $3 million, we need 4. We need 4.2. Those kinds of things. So I think we should push this to the fiscal year 25 bond issue. I think that's the wise decision here. Keep the capital projects fund healthy, be able to have those funds to support all of the buildings within the district, and then do this right out of the chute with the 25 bond. Thanks.
Thank you. And Board Member Sparks?
This is just a clarifying question. The Paradise Park was not necessarily part of the bond that we passed, was it?
That's correct. It was a second early childhood center.
Okay. So okay. So with that being said, your concerns, I think, are valid concerns. I think they came up in our work session of making sure that we're not deferring things that are essential of our function or deferring things that we know is very clear that's going to have to be addressed through the facility audits or whatever that they normally do through their operations. That's where my comfortability comes, is knowing that that is not going to happen. But I just want you to know that I do totally understand where you're coming from, and I can agree with you more.
I think, and I'll jump in if that's okay, because I agree. It's important, our maintenance, and we discussed that, I know, at length at our work session. Clarifying, so jump in if I'm not stating this correctly, but I'll maybe say it a little bit differently. So we had this bond that thankfully our voters approved. There were projects that were slated for that bond. One of those projects was a new early childhood center. At that time, we thought it might be at Prairie View. Finding the opportunity for Paradise Park and moving to that location was exciting, I think, for all of us as board members. So with that, we set aside a budget piece for the early childhood center, thinking about there's extra things around here and there's extra projects that we may be able to do due to the good financial stewardship and the hard work in our finance department, and due to Kyle and his team's hard work around all the construction projects. We found that we've got additional bond funds past what we've promised as a part of that initial bond. And with that, we moved a portion of that money, that extra money, to the Paradise Park, thinking that might be enough for both inside and outside. And we moved money also to a general capital improvement that targeted bond funds were going to feed into. So this is kind of the extra to the capital project budget that we put in. So I guess I'm reiterating that so that anybody listening, and reiterating for myself, when we're talking about capital projects and maintenance, it's not like we're going out there and robbing that capital budget to bring money in here. It's all the bond funds, and we're saying we put some in this capital bucket, we're taking a little bit back out, is kind of how I'm got it in my head. Is that correct?
Yes, that's accurate. So
Okay.
that, as you look at the bond budget report that the Finance Committee reviews, as well as the board has in tonight's agenda, you'll see that there is a section for the general capital improvements.
Yeah.
That, a little over $8 million, I believe, is our bond funds that were set aside for those general capital improvements. And these overages in the bids are going to come out of that budget line item.
For this outdoor?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. I just wanted to kind of clarify that for everybody as well. I'm not sure who is next, so I'm going to go Board Member Murdoch. Board Member Eslick.
I'm not going to say too much because honestly, Board Member Murdoch really very concisely stated many of my concerns. But I think just one I want to highlight is the negative balance that he brought up, and that's concerning. I recognize that there might be some items that are not critical right now that we would not be using those funds for if we move them to the Paradise Park project. But again, I just go back to it's a great program, and I think it will benefit many students. But I mean, I still go back to some of our conversation in the work session where if we're foregoing things like new flooring, new lighting, replacement roofing, even if it's not falling through, that shouldn't be the trigger point to replace something if it's that critical. But just if we can add some of that money for things in buildings that need maybe even larger project attention, but we're giving them a little bit, like the new floors, the new lighting, just things that will help that educational space feel like they're gaining some attention from the district as well, and also leaving some in reserve to be able to replenish some of those negatives that Board Member Murdoch pointed out. So I'm just expressing support for some of the things that, some of those concerns. I share them, and I appreciate all of the very concise ways that they were addressed. Thank you.
Board Member Murdoch.
I think for me, and I appreciate what you're saying, because I agree with you too, right? And I had the discussion even with you, right, that I was torn on this particular project on which way to go. I think for me, in the end, I just look at it and say, if there's 100 projects on our capital project list that we should be doing, if we can do 30 of them with our current budget, great. If we can do 50 of them because we actually moved the money, we're better off doing the 50. So, I mean, in the end, I will 100% support it either way, obviously. And I'm all for the project, by the way. I hope people understand that. Like, I want the project. I want a lot of things. But I want the project, but I want it in fiscal year with the bond 25. Thanks.
Board Member Sparks.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just had just a couple of comments. You know, whether it's a bond project that's deferred or capital that's deferred, either one of those items is going to cost more money 2 years from now. So, I mean, there's cost escalation either way. If this project were deferred to a bond, in my mind, you know, the two big ticket items that we've talked about were roofing and mechanical. But if you told me to go right now and spend $5 million on roofing and mechanical, I'm really hesitant to say that in the next year and a half, 2 years, I could even spend that money. We are really struggling with supply chain on both of those areas. And, you know, if you look back in 21, we spent less than $5 million on facilities capital. That's not because we wanted to. That was a lot of money that got left on the table. It's because we couldn't. We had to defer our roofing and mechanical projects. This year we're doing a lot better. But remember, we bid a almost $5 million roofing project early spring last year, and it's probably going to be next summer before we finish it. about a year and a half later. We ordered rooftop units middle of last year, and it may be next summer at Hazel Grove before they're in. So, you know, we're planning right now our next round of mechanical projects for next summer, but I'm just not confident that the units will actually be able to be delivered. So, I just have to say I am just so deeply appreciative of your guys' concern about capital, because that's my life, is maintaining our facilities, and that is 100% what I love to hear. But if you told me to go and spend money on mechanical and roofing right now, I'm just not confident that I can tell you that I could spend the money.
Can I ask him a question? Since I'm sorry.
Board Member Sparks, are you comfortable with that?
I apologize, because I really wanted to follow up, because that's a very good point. We I knew I was going to enjoy sitting right next to you here, right? But even to that point, that brings the question to mind that even if you can't spend the money now, if the amount of money that we need for maintenance projects is X dollars, whenever it comes in, we're still going to need the money, right?
Right.
So if in the answer that we got in our packet is correct, that some of the supply bottlenecks are starting to clear a little bit, right? Then it really becomes a question, I guess, and you can persuade me here, because being on the fence here on this issue, persuade me then, because, you know, the end result would be if we push to a 25 bond, do you think by fiscal year 25, essentially, or maybe even 26, because of the way the bond project wouldn't even go right until probably 26, you know, that kind of thing. Do you think that our capital funding and the projects that we should be doing, and I say should, not that we have to do, right? Because I think we have more that we should be doing than what we are capable. Do you think we have the funds to be able to do it through that if we still did this project and didn't put the money in it? Do you think we'll make it 4 years without being able to have those funds?
Yeah, we're talking.
Sorry to put you on the spot, but hey, it's a good
No, yeah.
dialogue, so.
No, I appreciate that. You know, we're talking about somewhere between $2 to $3 million a year for the next 2 years. And we proposed that some of that could come from furniture. You know, the other items, I think, can be spread. And I'm already working with Nathan, because even the roofing contract we have and the mechanical contract, we can't get them done in a fiscal year purchase order. So even those are stretching over fiscal years. And so there's a lot of opportunity for that money and a lot of unknowns for that money to flex year to year. And yeah, I wish I had a crystal ball, but there are some good indicators right now that things are starting to level out for next year. And so we're optimistic, but the worst thing that we could do, if I just say this, is not do either one of them. If we don't award this contract, and we can't award and spend money on capital, then we receive escalation in both of those categories. We need to get one of them done so we can stop the escalating cost in one of those areas.
And I would say, to that point, you know, we have a timeline from the time we sell those bonds to spend them. We've got 3 years, and the clock is ticking. And if we don't get them sold in those 3 years, then we face some arbitrage issues.
Kyle, that last point, that really wrecked my night right there. Right?
So
to
board
make sure that
members-
we got to get one, that wrecked my night. I was
Board Member
still
Sparks?
so close.
Did you yeah.
So I just have 2 questions. My first question is going to be for one of you, and then I'm going to then refer to Dr. Buck if Nate could probably answer the second question. My first question is if we were to not approve this project, would we then start seeking additional projects with that available money?
So what I would envision is if we don't pursue this project, we would pursue the plan as it's written, which is to put that money in the general capital improvement, and tell Kyle to do what he just said he didn't know if he could do, is go spend that money.
Okay.
Because once again, the clock's ticking, and we got to spend it.
Okay. Thank you for that answer. Then my second question is going to be, if we did approve this project, Mr. Holder, and if things came up that we were not expecting to come up when it pertains to our facilities, will we have the money to meet those needs?
Yes. We will be okay with either direction that the board takes.
Okay.
And in a district this large, we have to use bond projects to complete some of our capital projects. We just, historically, that's what we've done, and that's really the course of action that we have to take. Yes, we will be fine. And all the points have been made, and they're all good points, but really, you can go either direction, and we'll be in good shape.
Okay. I don't know if we conveyed Mr. Murdoch, but you have sold me.
All right, Board Member Marshall. Okay.
Quick question. This was the option that had the 1.8 million going to general capital too, right? So it's not like we're not.
There is still money.
Right, so there's still money going to the general capital, just not. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, good point. Thank you. All right. So how about we move for a vote? Move forward with the vote. Do we have another comment? I see no lights. I see tissues. All right, Mrs. Mert, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Board Member Marshall?
Yes. Aye.
Board Member Sparks?
Aye.
Board Member Eslick?
No.
Board Member Foley?
Can you come back to me? Pass. Aye.
Board Member Fritchie?
Aye.
Board Member Murdoch?
No.
President Campbell?
Motion carries 5-2. So we will move forward with Paradise Park and that instructional. So thank you. Great discussion. I appreciate everyone's input and discussion around that. Excellent job. And thank you so much for answering all of our questions. Appreciate that. Moving on now to our items of information, our written reports. Item 10.01, does anyone have questions or comments? I will just once again thank you, Kyle, for all your effort, and Nathan and Dr. Shelton, all the effort that goes into this bond report, because this is exactly how I can make these decisions in these meetings. So thank you very much. Moving forward, item 10.02, does anyone have any? Yes, Board Member Fritchie, Vice President.
Thanks, it's okay. I'm really glad to see that we are having the buildings reporting each month regarding their efforts to actively engage in accomplishing our board priorities. I'd like to thank Principal Moorhead at Summit Point Elementary for giving us a look at the interventions and processes that the building is using this year to accomplish their board goals. And I especially like the work in engaging their stakeholders and the morning diversity and inclusion announcements that they were using in their building. So good work, Summit Point Elementary. Second, then I want to thank the other Principal Moorhead at East Trails Middle School for a great illustration of the board goals in action. I loved the positive postcards that I saw on there, the parade of kindness, Team Tuesdays, and if you haven't been in the middle school and worked with kids on teaming, then you really don't understand how valuable that is. Team Tuesdays sounds awesome. Use of the flexible learning spaces that we've all been able to see up here at East Trails Middle School, and communication strategies that they're trying to employ there at East Trails. There are definitely some great things happening at East Trails Middle School, so congratulations.
Great. Any other comments around that? I did notice too at East Trails, excited to see that the PTSA there. So instead of PTA, engaging with the students as well, and so that they're in their charter phase there. So new school, new norming and storming and all those team building things. That's really exciting to see as well. All right, moving on then to item 10.03. Do we have questions or comments? Board Member Murdoch?
I had one question. I should have told Kyle just to stay up here on this one. But it really is just around the energy management thing. And I think we talked about this at some point, so I apologize if this is being repetitive. Do we have an energy savings thing like with like any kind of program or something like that, right? In terms of, yeah, like is that something that we're doing based on our energy consumption stuff?
Yeah, we're currently not, well, I should say, we had performance contracts probably, gosh, it was about 10 years ago. I believe we're still paying on the very end of those, but
Okay.
we're not actively in.
In one right now. Okay, okay. That's all I needed. Thanks, appreciate it.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Appreciate the written report. Excellent information and excellent material. Board Member, or Vice President Fritchie?
Hey, thank you. I know Kyle and Dr. Shelton have done some heavy lifting tonight, but I just wanted to give kudos to Kyle Gorell. It's very clear through this report that the facilities department has some very good leadership. The goals in this report were very clear. They reflect the CSIP plan in supporting student learning in all of our schools and facilities. And that program, there were several words that came to mind as I was reading through that report. And those words were that your program reflects adaptability, flexibility, very careful planning, coordination, and an eye to the future. And so I don't think you can miss that when you read that report, is that it was all of those things. The construction and maintenance of our facilities is thoughtfully planned and carried out, maximizing our district resources. And I think we all share that concern shared in the report about hiring, and both now and in the future that we saw in there. It's just so hard to get good employees these days, and we really appreciate the ones that we do have. Hopefully we can start growing interest in those professions and those trades through our own internship programs and our career-centered opportunities. It was great visiting pipe fitters and really understanding what pipe fitters do. I had to ask him because I really didn't understand. And hearing that perhaps we're going to get to connect with building trades too. But, I think our career navigators, our career director, our facilities department, we all work together. We can provide some great opportunities for our students. So I just wanted to say thank you, Kyle, and all of our employees. Thanks for your dedication to our students, staff, and our community, because you guys serve our community too, heaven knows, with all of those youth rec sports that are happening in our buildings and on our fields. So thank you very, very much.
So now we've come to the end of our agenda. We'll close our meeting out and we meet back upstairs to continue our closed session. Thank you.